Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Longhorn Radio. I am your host, Shreya Sonone, and welcome to Episode 8, Protect Asian Lives. There has been a recent surge of violence in our country targeted against Asians, and we felt that it is important to bring more awareness to the Asian community. Before we get started, we would like to provide a few resources to all you listeners who may be feeling distressed over the recent attacks against Asians right now. In the description below, you'll find the Santa Clara County Suicide and Crisis Line, the National Suicide Prevention Line, and a link to Stop AAPI Hate, where you can report an act of hate towards an Asian American or Pacific Islander that you may have witnessed. We would also like to encourage you guys to check out the link for Compassion in Oakland, where they're offering several volunteer opportunities for you to chaperone the elderly, answer dispatch calls for those of you who are bilingual, and more. They also accept donations to help accomplish their goal of protecting elderly Asians, so we really encourage you all to make a contribution. Now, back to the episode. Today, for our guest, we have invited your amazing ASB Vice President. So please welcome Isabel Morimoto. Isabel.
Hey guys.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I am doing good, thank you. Let's jump right in. So, one of the many topics we'd like to cover today is the diversity of Asia. Many people believe that being Asian means that you're part of a very specific group of individuals. However, Asia includes several different countries and have all very different cultures and traditions. So, Isabel, we would love to talk about your country and a little bit of its culture to spread more awareness about each part of Asia. So, why don't you start us off?
Okay, yeah. So I'm half Japanese and half Mongolian. My mom actually immigrated here from Mongolia maybe about like 2 decades ago. Whoa, I can't talk. Sorry. So like 20 years ago. And she brought along my brother, who is actually also born in Mongolia as well. I love to talk about my brother, so I just wanted to talk about his background a little bit, because he came to Lee about 17 years ago as well, not knowing any English at all. So I think that's really inspiring to hear, because he also went to Lee, and I thought that was cool. And then on my dad's side, they're Japanese, and so that's a little bit about my cultural background.
Oh, cool. How was the transition like for your brother coming to America without knowing any English?
It was really hard for him because he didn't really have any friends. And, of course, in his English classes, he wasn't always getting the best grades. But he really, got through it and, really excelled in math and finance. So that's how he got into, UC Santa Cruz.
And, that's amazing.
Yeah. So now he works for GoFundMe, which I think is...
Oh, yo, look at that. That's super cool.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on, we also wanted to address many of the events that are happening in America right now that are putting additional stress on the Asian community. So our country has witnessed 2 shootings, one of which was directly targeted at Asian women. And because of this, many Asians feel scared and unsafe. So Isabel, could you explain what you think of the current situation, or how do you feel about what's happening right now as a person of color?
Yeah, so the recent shootings have been obviously so vile and scary, because especially the one that happened in Atlanta happened because it was the shooter tried to eliminate his temptations, which I think is the most gross thing you can say to justify this. And I don't think there's any way to justify how they were killed. And I know that some people or some places don't even recognize that these murders and hate crimes have been racially motivated and just been pushing them aside as just a normal crime. And I think that's really vile. And even I heard a school district in I think Washington doesn't even consider Asians as people of color anymore, and it's just really hurtful. And I think that it's just been really hard for Asians recently and Pacific Islanders.
Right, yeah, definitely. Have you personally felt very unsafe during these times? Because I know certain people in certain parts of our country living near those, crime areas have been feeling really unsafe right now. Have you been facing any worries, like not just you, but maybe your family or anything?
I don't think like physical violence. We're not. I think the area we live in has been a little bit more safe compared to more crime, high crime areas. But there have like my family sometimes are scared of like hate speech, and especially online, like it's really hard to avoid some comments about Asians eating dogs, or like relating it to coronavirus. And it's just those types of comments that we have to worry about.
Have you ever received any of those types of comments before, or have you been doing well so far?
I've definitely received these comments before. Sometimes, online, you just have to ignore it and
Mm-hmm.
kind of, either stand up for yourself, or some people can't even do that because it's like so shocking to receive like these types of comments. But I think I've been dealing with them pretty well, because I don't really let them get to my head,
That's good.
which
That's good.
I think it's important.
Yeah, that is important to keep in mind. Yeah, the recent hate has been very terrible, and it's good that you have been pulling through that, even though like you've been getting comments, as you said earlier. So yeah, thank you, Isabel, for sharing your thoughts and telling us a little bit about your culture and what you've been going through recently. I really appreciate you coming on. All right, so now moving to our second half of that episode, we have a special guest here today. So I hope all of you guys are as excited as I am. Here, all the way from Texas, please welcome my friend, Katie, chair of the Asian Association at her workplace. Hey, Katie.
Hey, Shreya, how are you?
I am doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks.
That is great. All right, so let's start off. Could you please tell us about what you do in your Asian Employees Association at your workplace?
Yeah, so especially with more recently, so what I do is I help facilitate a lot of events and coordinate a lot of events as well to help educate not only Asian Pacific Islander employees, but all employees on the Asian Pacific Islander culture. And then we also provide just ultimately a space for people to connect and build a community.
Has this association been around for a long time, or is it a recent thing?
Yeah, it started in about 2010, so it's been around for a while. Yeah.
All right, and do you have like a main goal in that association? Like, is there one thing you really want to? Do you maybe want to educate more people at your workplace about stuff that is going on? Like recently, as of right now, do you have a specific goal, or?
Yeah, I think for me personally, I think the systemic racism that we've faced recently is it's something that's been happening for years, but especially with COVID, now it has more spotlight. And so, what I really want to do is just help people start having conversations. And, typically people don't really talk about all the racism that they've felt, but I think it's a really important conversation to have because it not only helps spread people's stories, but also it educates people that maybe aren't people of color or they just don't understand the racism. Because I've had conversations with people and they didn't even know that Asians and Pacific Islanders face racism. And so just bringing that awareness, I think, will be really helpful.
I love that. It's great that you do that at your workplace. So, as explained before, Asia is a very diverse continent. And some people don't really understand that. They just say, like, oh, just, Japan is qualifies you as Asian, or like just being in China qualifies as you as an Asian person. But, that's definitely not the case. So, could you maybe talk about your native country and its traditions?
Yeah, so I'm Filipino. I'm full Filipino. So I've always been in a kind of weird space because I identify as Pacific Islander and Asian. So I kind of use them interchangeably. But the Philippines is different because it has all sorts of different influences. So there's obviously the Spanish influence because we were colonized for over 300 years. And then there's also Japanese, Chinese influences, and also Indian. So it's just kind of like a big mixture of a bunch of different cultures, which I think is really cool.
Oh, that's great. Ever since, your childhood, have you felt very connected to your culture, or have you been a little distant from it? How's that been?
Yeah, I feel like I've been connected to my culture. As a first generation American, my parents have done a really good job of instilling a lot of the Filipino values and culture into my life. And so I think that's something like that I value, especially today as an adult. So even I think with Asian families, family is always a very, very big thing. And so that's something that has just been very significant in my life. So, yeah.
Great. Yeah, I'm a first generation American too. So both of my parents, they were born and raised in India. And then my parents, after getting married, they moved here. And I feel like they also did a pretty good job at, making me very well aware of the culture. I also recently, fun fact, I learned how to read and write in Marathi in middle school. And I'm still struggling, but I like that, I have a little part of my culture with me, and maybe hopefully I can pass it down. I think it's a great part that I have like a background, and I'm really proud of it personally. Like, I'm proud to be Indian, and I like to show it off sometimes. So, yeah. All right, so earlier you mentioned that you are a first generation American. You have grown up in America. So, as an Asian person growing up in America, have you possibly ever felt ostracized by your peers at school? Maybe felt like a target of racism, gotten any of those derogatory comments or anything?
Yeah, I have actually. So I think for me growing up, especially in the time that I grew up in, diversity wasn't as widely celebrated as it is
Right.
today. So I actually felt very uncomfortable being Asian. And so that was just something that I was always very insecure and struggled with because where I grew up in Aurora, Colorado, which is right outside of Denver. And so the Asian community wasn't very large. So I grew up predominantly in a white community. So it was really hard for me to understand. And I think also with my parents being newer to the country as well, just kind of like we really focused on assimilating. So for me, I don't even know I can kind of understand, but I don't speak Tagalog, which is the native language of the Philippines. And so there's just a lot of different things and comments I've had people tell me that I can't speak English and I can't communicate because of my Asian descent. And so things like that, I think, are I don't take it personally, but I think situations like that or statements like that can definitely change a person. And so I think that's why today I'm very dedicated to making sure that everybody's more educated and aware because we deserve to be here just as much as anybody else and we shouldn't be treated any differently just because of the color of their skin. So
right. And how about now as an adult, being in a workplace and, living your adult life? Have you still been a target of those type of things? Have situations gotten better for you over time or worse?
Yeah, I think for me, I haven't experienced racism recently. I would say probably the last time I experienced it was maybe when I was my senior year of college when I was studying abroad in Spain. So racism does exist for Asians in Spain as well. So that was probably the last time that I've really had to deal with an uncomfortable situation. But other than that, luckily I have not. But I do know that that is still very prevalent today. So yeah, I've been very lucky to not have to deal with it in more recent times.
Yeah, it is. For me, so I've grown up here, as I said before, and I feel like the media really made me feel like being a brown or an Asian person, I wasn't good enough to live here or whatever. I always felt oh, I had to be one of those Barbie princesses or something that like with light skin and light hair and stuff like that. And I have like gotten like those, stereotypical comments against Indian people and stuff like that. They'd mock me for my culture, my dance, our clothing, and stuff like that, whatnot. But now I've kind of just come to realize that some people are going to be people, and I'm just going to have to. I've kind of gotten rid of that idea that I'm not good enough or I'm not like pretty enough, because I don't have blue eyes. That doesn't make me ugly or unpretty in any way. I think brown eyes are very pretty. And so I've learned to embrace my culture, and I think that's a good thing that I'm going to carry on with me. Yeah. So
that's great.
Thank you. On to our last question for you today. So you have gone through your many years of education here, and now you are in the workplace working to educate your fellow colleagues about, Asian people and diversity and stuff like that. So how do you suggest that we as a school act to provide towards the Asian community to make them feel more safe as well as included during these trying times?
Yeah, I think it's really important to simply check in with other people. So just even ask how they're doing, because I think a lot of people in general are really processing what's going on.
Right.
And I think also I would hope that people at your school don't have to deal with a lot of the hate speech and crime a lot, especially at school. So I would just say, check in with people and just, if you can, like, talk about it and, talk about your culture and educate people as much as you can, just because I think it's kind of like, if you don't know, you don't know, right? So I think just having more of those conversations about, the racism and whatnot that you felt, or like if something makes you feel uncomfortable, I think it's really important to also speak up, because I know Asians are also known for, just kind of putting your head down and working hard and not saying anything. And so it's really important to use your voice, and like, you don't necessarily have to like yell at anybody, obviously, but
Right.
if you're in an uncomfortable situation and like if somebody witnesses that, maybe speak up or provide support, or like even just if somebody were to see it, just be like, hey, to the person that maybe had racist comments said to them, but just being like, hey, are you okay? Like, and just talk it through with them, because I think that in itself is very helpful. And so I think communicating about it is probably the best thing that I would recommend.
Right, yeah. Our Lee High School ASB leadership class does put in a lot of work into trying to, pull up these underrepresented groups of people on our campus, like up out of the roots. And, we do try to put in a lot of, we do put in a lot of work to, help bring more awareness and attention to these groups of people. And yeah, I think with what you said, I think we'll just continue to make sure that, people are okay and that they're getting checked on, because, as a school, I think it is important to create a healthy campus for everyone, since they're going to be here for like 4 years, right? So I think that is very important. So yeah, thank you so much, Katie, for coming onto our podcast for today. We know you're really busy, so we really appreciate you taking the time out of your hectic schedule to speak with us.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
Of course, yeah.
This was great.
Thank you. And that is a wrap. Thank you again to our very special guests for your input, and to our lovely listeners for checking out this week's episode. Quick reminder to look at the Compassion in Oakland website, as well as the StopAAPIHate.org website linked in the description below, in order to help out during these situations. Now, before we send you off, don't forget to follow the family Instagram account for all things Lee. And remember, you can be a future guest and join us in the podcast to discuss a topic of your choice by filling out the form linked below at the family Instagram bio. Thank you for tuning in to Longhorn Radio. This is Shreya signing out.